I am Maya Williams, a 30-year-old therapist. It was Christmas morning. Juliet, my 26-year-old sister, an influencer, tore into a massive box. Her shriek was followed by the blinding flash of a $4,300 Gucci Marmont. My parents, David and Susan, were ecstatic. It was the annual show of blatant, unconditional favoritism. Then came my gift. A small, plain envelope containing a $2 printed season's greetings card. No signature. No personalized message. The irony was suffocating. I spend my life helping others find their worth. But what did I say when a $2 card became the final, cruel measure of mine? I'm a licensed therapist. My job is to sit across from people, look them in the eye, and help them understand one fundamental truth: your value is intrinsic, you don't have to earn it. I spend my days giving others the validation and self-respect that my own family had systematically denied me for 3 decades. In the Williams household, however, I was invisible. My sister, Juliet, the influencer, was the star, the walking embodiment of everything flashy and surface level. I was the silent, stable background, the dependable one they only called when something broke. The therapist who couldn't heal her own home life. The irony is brutal, right? But how does a woman who champions boundaries for others finally find the courage to set one for herself? Every Christmas, every birthday, every anniversary, the cycle was the same. I'd tell myself, they know I'm successful now. They know I run my own practice. This year, they'll see me. This year, the gift won't feel like an afterthought. It was a fragile hope, a delusion I clung to for 29 years, constantly setting myself up for the same, inevitable, emotional disappointment. My family didn't actively hate me, they simply practiced subtle neglect. I was the invisible foundation, the one whose quiet stability was taken for granted. Juliet was the sparkly roof. The $4,300 Gucci bag wasn't just a gift, it was a physical manifestation of my mother's lifelong message: flashy is valuable, and stable is disposable. I was done waiting for their approval. But what happens when the invisible foundation finally cracks? After 29 years of silent disappointment, what kind of words did I use to shatter the cycle of neglect for good? I spent years in school, accumulating zero debt, building a practice focused on ethical care. My reward, stability. Juliet spent her time on trends and quickly leveraged the Williams name. Her reward, a $4,300 gift. The family's message was clear: my dedication to growth was secondary to her surface-level flash. That $2 card wasn't just cheap, it was a symbol. It was proof that my efforts to improve myself, to be a contributing, stable adult, were utterly and perpetually unseen by the 2 people whose approval I foolishly still craved. When a $2 card symbolizes 29 years of neglect, what is the value of the words you use to shatter that neglect forever? My mother, Susan, was openly instructing Juliet on how to pose with the Gucci bag for Instagram. Dad, David, stood nearby, practically glowing. Their attention was a spotlight on Juliet, and the darkness around me, the therapist who flew across the country just to be there, felt absolute. They weren't just giving a gift, they were performing an open ritual of my inferiority. I finally looked away from the $2 card and caught Aunt Margaret's eye. Aunt Margaret, the family historian, had seen it all. Her face wasn't pitying, it was a clear mask of moral outrage. That look was everything. It told me the truth: this wasn't just my perception. This was a spectacle that shamed them, and for the first time, I felt the fire of righteous anger, not just sadness. When a stranger validates your pain, the silence ends. What did I say to shatter the Williams' blissful, selfish ignorance after 29 years of public humiliation? That $2 card wasn't just this year's slight, it was the final, archive document of 29 years of subtle rejection. It was the C in high school that Dad dismissed while praising Juliet's perfect attendance. It was the quiet graduation ceremony versus Juliet's lavish college party. I felt the weight of every past dismissal coalesce into one burning, righteous anger. The therapist in me knew exactly what was happening. I was reaching my ultimate breaking point, the moment where self-preservation must override relational obligation. My goal wasn't to argue the price, it was to assert my inherent value. I slowly placed the $2 card on the coffee table. This was it. The time for silent martyrdom was over. The table is set, and the $2 card is the bomb. But how does a therapist use her clinical calm to deliver a statement so devastating it permanently ends a 29-year relationship? The neglect didn't break me, it became my fuel. I channeled the hurt of every overlooked achievement into determination. I knew the only true way to defeat their narrative was to build a life so independently successful that their opinions, or their cheap gifts, would be rendered utterly irrelevant. I didn't seek revenge, I sought autonomy. While Juliet flaunted borrowed influence, I quietly built my practice, focusing on professional integrity. Every client helped, every successful session, was a brick in my self-made fortress. My success was hard-earned, not granted. It was a shield forged in stoicism. The $4,300 bag was financed by their approval, my career was financed by my own refusal to need it. My self-made shield was strong, but the $2 card still broke through. Now that I'd traded sadness for steel, how did I use my therapist's clarity to deliver the most calculated verbal takedown of my life? The neglect didn't break me, it became my fuel. I channeled the hurt of every overlooked achievement into determination. I knew the only true way to defeat their narrative was to build a life so independently successful that their opinions, or their cheap gifts, would be rendered utterly irrelevant. I didn't seek revenge, I sought autonomy. While Juliet flaunted borrowed influence, I quietly built my practice, focusing on professional integrity. Every client helped, every successful session, was a brick in my self-made fortress. My success was hard-earned, not granted. It was a shield forged in stoicism. The $4,300 bag was financed by their approval, my career was financed by my own refusal to need it. My self-made shield was strong, but the $2 card still broke through. Now that I'd traded sadness for steel, how did I use my therapist's clarity to deliver the most calculated verbal takedown of my life? I closed my eyes and breathed. As a therapist, I teach that fairness isn't always reality, but respect is non-negotiable. I realized the profound moral corruption of this room. They weren't just poor gift givers, they were actively discounting my entire adult life and character. They judged worth by fleeting social media metrics, not by stability or integrity. The choice was stark: accept the $2 card and the perpetual disregard, or use this moment, this clear, moral outrage, to purchase my freedom. I opened my eyes. The conversation was about to change. The stage is set. The final, fatal mistake has been made. But what calm, clinical words can a therapist use to dismantle 29 years of toxicity in a single minute? I wasn't entirely alone. I had built a found family, colleagues and friends who saw my competence, not my familial designation. They were my true mentors. They didn't care about the Williams name, they cared about Maya, the effective therapist. Their validation was the nutrient I needed, contrasting sharply with the toxic drought at home. My best friend, an HR executive, once told me, "Your boundaries aren't selfish, they're your internal corporate policy." That small phrase changed everything. I stopped viewing my family interactions as a child seeking love and started viewing them as an executive managing a high-risk liability. That perspective shift gave me an immense, terrifying, but necessary inner strength. This external support was my emotional armor. I realized the only power my parents had over me was the power I consciously granted them. When I held that $2 card, I wasn't just Maya the daughter, I was Maya the therapist, ready to implement a professional intervention on her own life. The boundaries were set, and the therapist was ready to intervene. What strategic, clinical words did I use in that confrontation? And how did I ensure my exit was a final, empowering act, not a defeat? I discussed the gift syndrome with Dr. Chen, my clinical supervisor. She didn't offer pity, she offered a clinical framework. She called it emotional discounting. She said, "Maya, they discount your value to amplify Juliet's. You are a threat to their established dynamic. Your financial independence is your ultimate weapon because it renders their conditional love irrelevant." Her words were the final puzzle piece. I realized my anger wasn't about the $2. It was about their attempt to control me using conditional affection. I didn't need their love to be whole, I was already whole. I could observe their favoritism without internalizing it. This detachment was not coldness, it was self-preservation, the most professional boundary I could set. The Christmas scene flashed back. Juliet's glee, the Gucci box, the blank $2 card. Armed with Dr. Chen's clinical insight, I knew exactly what my final, self-defining response would be. It wasn't revenge, it was a therapeutic discharge of a 29-year-old toxic debt. The debt was due, and the Christmas chaos was the courtroom. How did I transform a $2 card into the ultimate instrument of emotional closure? And what was my family's explosive reaction to my clinical shutdown? I spent the hours before the confrontation rehearsing my delivery, not my words. The tone had to be clinical, respectful, and entirely devoid of emotion. I knew that if I cried, I lost. If I yelled, I failed. My objective was to state facts, establish boundaries, and execute the final, strategic withdrawal. My professional training was my only shield against 29 years of emotional conditioning. The core of my argument was ethical, not personal. I didn't blame them, I identified the dynamic as toxic. As a therapist, I recognized their bias as a flawed, inherited family pattern. My responsibility was to break the chain. I realized that speaking out wasn't an act of revenge, but an ethical obligation to myself, a demonstration of the self-respect I championed for my clients. I looked at the $2 card, then at the beaming faces of my parents and sister. The knowledge that I held the power to redefine my own worth, independent of their approval, was absolute. The silence before I spoke was the most powerful moment of my life. The silence broke, and the truth was spoken. But what were those exact, devastating words that transformed a Christmas morning into a permanent family separation? I had flown home not just for Christmas, but for a personal milestone. This year, I wasn't going to absorb the emotional abuse, I was going to discharge it. I decided that this specific holiday would mark the end of my 29-year contract with them. The contract stated, I provide emotional stability, they provide conditional love. I was there to announce the termination of that agreement. My approach wasn't going to be reactive. The $2 card, placed next to the $4,300 bag, was my visual cue. I didn't need to yell, the physical contrast screamed louder than I ever could. I just needed to provide the clinical commentary. I had to ensure my words were the kind they couldn't dismiss as just being sensitive. I was there to perform emotional surgery. I watched Juliet and my parents, absorbed in their bubble of mutual admiration. They had no idea that the silent therapist sitting among them was minutes away from permanently redefining their family structure. The sense of calm anticipation was absolute. The liberation was already beginning, the surgical light was on. How did I use the $4,300 bag and the $2 card in the same sentence to deliver the most calculated, boundary-setting statement of my life? Despite all my professional training, my hands were shaking. The fear of confrontation was real. I wasn't afraid of their anger, I was terrified of their dismissiveness, the familiar sigh, the rolled eyes that would label me overly sensitive again. That gaslighting was their ultimate weapon, designed to make me doubt the reality of my own pain. I looked at the $2 card again and turned the fear into a moral imperative. I had to do this. Not for revenge, but for the future clients I would counsel. How could I teach them to advocate for themselves if I couldn't model that self-respect in the most crucial arena, my own family? My professional integrity depended on this moment. The action wasn't selfish. It was a matter of professional and personal ethics. I straightened my spine, took a deep breath, and met my mother's gaze. The shaking stopped. The fear subsided. All that remained was a quiet, resolute determination. The old Maya was gone. The therapist Maya was taking over. The therapist had the floor. How did my calm, clinical delivery of the truth shock my parents more than any yell? And what did I say to terminate the relationship contract once and for all? Mom, Dad, I need to address the gifts. I picked up the $2 card, holding it next to Juliet's new $4,300 Gucci bag. The discrepancy isn't about the monetary value, it's about the emotional investment. This bag represents your active, exuberant validation of Juliet. This blank card represents the absolute, 0% validation you have invested in me over 30 years. My mother, Susan, initially laughed, a nervous, dismissive sound. Dad just stared. They defaulted immediately to their defense mechanism, gaslighting. Susan started, "Oh, Maya, don't be so dramatic. It's just a card. You're too sensitive. You're a successful therapist, you don't need things like Juliet does." The lie was so familiar. It almost made me smile. I don't need things, Mom. I need respect. The $2 card validates the truth. I am disposable to you. I flew across the country for this predictable outcome. I am leaving now. I will not be returning until that dynamic changes. The truth was spoken, the boundary was set. But how did my parents react when their silent, reliable daughter finally walked out, and what was the immediate, chilling aftermath of my final exit? I didn't wait for a response. I calmly retrieved my coat and carry-on bag, which I had deliberately kept by the door. I walked past Juliet, who was too absorbed in her new bag to even process the conflict. I didn't slam the door, I closed it quietly, with the precision of a professional closing a file on a successfully terminated case. That quiet click of the door shattered their reality more than any scream could. I could hear Dad finally yelling, "Maya, wait. Where are you going? It's Christmas." They were panicking because their reliable background character, the one they never had to worry about, had just walked off the stage. They weren't worried about my feelings, they were worried about the disruption of their comfortable narrative. Standing on the porch, inhaling the cold air, I felt it, self-liberation. I left the $2 card on their table, an invoice for a debt they refused to pay. My revenge was not destroying them, it was simply choosing myself. The door closed, the liberation began. But what devastating consequences did my quiet exit have on the perfect Williams family image? And did they ever try to pay that $2 emotional debt? I booked the earliest flight out. Sitting alone in the silent hotel room, the cold clinical calm I'd exhibited at the Williams house dissolved into a deep, quiet sadness. It was the grief of mourning a family I'd always wanted, not the family I actually had. But the sadness was finite, overshadowed by a brutal clarity. I realized I had just performed the biggest act of self-care of my life. My therapy mentor, Dr. Chen, had warned me, boundary setting often costs you the relationship. And I paid that cost willingly. I was trading conditional approval for absolute autonomy. The $4,300 Gucci bag was irrelevant. My financial security meant I never needed to stand there and beg for emotional scraps again. I was now completely self-reliant, emotionally and financially. I knew their first move would be anger, followed by guilt-tripping. I preemptively blocked their numbers and deleted my social media for the holiday. I was implementing the no-contact protocol, not as a punishment, but as a temporary, necessary measure to solidify my new reality. My freedom felt absolute. The phone went silent, and the new life began. But how did the Williams family, who rely on appearances, react when they realized their silent daughter had just severed the tie, and what was their desperate next attempt to regain control? People ask if this was my revenge. True revenge isn't about striking back, it's about making yourself immune to the source of the pain. The real revenge was the realization that I didn't need their validation to survive, to thrive, or even to enjoy Christmas. I had completely neutralized their power over my emotions. That truth was my ultimate victory, far more valuable than any expensive bag. The quiet moments in the hotel were for mourning the fantasy of the perfect family, the loving, supportive parents I constantly chased. I allowed myself 10 minutes of real grief, the kind I reserve for my clients, before switching back to the empowered therapist. This self-compassion was vital. I wasn't cold, I was simply disciplined. I treated myself with the respect my family never did. The weight of 29 years of expectation was gone. The $2 card was just a piece of paper, but its refusal was my declaration of independence. I smiled at my reflection. That peace, that quiet confidence, was priceless. My peace was secured, but the Williams family panic was just beginning. How did their desperate, failed attempts to re-establish contact only solidify my choice, and what happened when I finally saw Juliet again? I wanted to thank you for the card. It's a perfect visual aid. I paused, letting the silence magnify the contrast between the $2 paper and the $4,300 leather. It perfectly symbolizes your consistent emotional discounting of my worth. The $4,300 is Juliet's reward for visibility. The $2 card is my reward for stability. I accept the truth it represents. The silence was explosive. Mom's face went from nervous laughter to pure shock. Dad, whose primary goal was always avoiding conflict, finally sputtered, "Maya, that's unfair." I didn't let him finish. I knew if I allowed them to control the narrative, they would successfully re-victimize me through gaslighting. This was my intervention. The contract is terminated. My value is inherent, not something I need to earn from you. I am officially setting the boundary of no contact. I am leaving now. I will not return until you can treat me with the respect I show my clients. The boundary was set, the exit was imminent. But how did my parents, realizing the severity of my calm declaration, escalate the situation, and what was the immediate, emotional fallout of my first step towards freedom? My mother, Susan, finally broke. Her shock turned into tears, a calculated performance designed to invoke guilt. "How could you ruin Christmas, Maya? After all we've done. You're just like your grandmother, so selfish." Dad tried to physically stop me, his face a mask of bewildered panic. Their attempts at control were so predictable, so familiar, they no longer pierced my resolve. "This is not about ruining Christmas, Dad. This is about ending the cycle of emotional debt." I stopped only to look directly at Aunt Margaret, who gave me a subtle, almost invisible nod of support. That single nod was my final piece of validation. I didn't need my parents' agreement, I needed the truth to be recognized. And Margaret saw it. I left the Christmas cheer, the $4,300 bag, and the $2 card behind. I stepped into the cold, clean air of the street. I was now completely free. The biggest act of revenge is refusing to participate in your own abuse. The door closed, but the war wasn't over. How did my parents respond to my no-contact boundary, and what unexpected, subtle retribution did the universe deliver to Juliet and the $4,300 Gucci bag? I was halfway to the taxi when I heard a soft footstep. Aunt Margaret was standing on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, the cold air hitting her face. She didn't call my name. She just nodded, the same knowing nod she gave inside. Her silent presence told me everything. I wasn't crazy. My perception was valid. The family dynamic was toxic, and someone finally saw the truth of the last 30 years. Margaret walked down the steps and gently placed a small, folded envelope in my hand. It wasn't money, it was a handwritten note. She said, her voice barely a whisper, "You chose peace over performance, Maya. That takes courage." The Williams family history is filled with people who should have left but didn't. You broke the cycle. You are not selfish, you are revolutionary. I couldn't speak, the tears finally welling up, not from pain, but from the sudden, overwhelming release of finding a single, true ally. I squeezed her hand. Thank you, Margaret. You are the only one who ever truly saw me. The note contained a printed photo, a picture of a very young Maya proudly holding a school trophy, which my parents had forgotten about entirely. Margaret smiled, a genuine, sad smile that contained generations of family knowledge. Now go. Go and build a life where your worth is never questioned. I got into the taxi. The Williams house, once a fortress of obligation, was now just a distant, cold house. I was already halfway home. My exit was validated, my soul was healed, but the story wasn't over. How did the toxic cycle of the Williams family eventually collapse without my emotional support? And what was the final, satisfying truth the universe delivered to Juliet? Back in the silent hotel room, my true celebration began. I ordered room service, poured a glass of champagne, and turned on a silly movie. This was the real Christmas, the ability to define my own joy, independent of anyone else's expectations or judgment. I raised my glass, a solitary toast to autonomy and the successful termination of a toxic family contract. My phone, still set to no contact, sat silently on the nightstand. I allowed myself one brief moment to search for doubt, for regret. There was none. I realized the profound difference between loneliness and solitude. I wasn't lonely, I was in profound, safe solitude. I had finally prioritized my own mental health over the performance of familial duty. The freedom was palpable. My revenge was simply living well, living authentically, and ensuring the toxic pattern ended with me. My next move was booking a first-class flight back home, treating myself with the expense that my parents reserved only for Juliet. My new, independent life was taking off, literally. But how long did it take for the silence to break the Williams family, and what frantic, desperate message finally broke through my defenses? I packed my bag, the same carry-on I brought, minus the emotional baggage. I read Margaret's note one last time, "You are revolutionary." That wasn't just affirmation, it was a final validation of my departure. I realized the family was counting on me to fail, to cave, to return and apologize for setting boundaries. That predictability was their weakness and my strength. I looked at the hotel mirror, no longer seeing the overlooked daughter, but the woman who took control. The sadness was fully replaced by a sense of calm. The $2 card had served its purpose. It was the catalyst for the greatest act of self-love. I didn't need a grand apology or their regret. I already had the one thing that truly mattered, closure on my own terms. Walking through the lobby, I felt the unstoppable momentum of a life fully owned. The revenge was complete the moment I stepped out of their door. Now, it was just about building the empire. I smiled, not at a thought, but at my destination. But how did the Williams family, realizing their power was gone, desperately try to sabotage my professional life? And what did Juliet do when her $4,300 bag finally failed her? The no-contact boundary worked instantly. Within 48 hours, the inevitable deluge began, Dad's frantic voicemails, all about their image, and Mom's guilt trip emails, "Juliet is upset." Their messages confirmed everything. My absence was purely an inconvenience to their lives, not a source of concern for mine. I stored them as clinical evidence, maintaining a calculated, professional distance. Then came the email from Aunt Margaret. It revealed the final, necessary truth. The $4,300 Gucci bag wasn't a gift, it was leverage. Juliet had amassed significant debt from failed ventures, and the bag was a bribe from my parents to keep her quiet about a financial bailout. They didn't reward Juliet's success. They bought her silence to maintain the facade of their perfect, successful family. This information was my ultimate vindication. I wasn't the unloved daughter, I was the only one financially and emotionally stable enough to threaten their careful construction. My $2 card was an honest assessment of their investment in me, while Juliet's bag was the high cost of their deception. The truth was exposed, but the public drama hadn't yet begun. How did the Williams family's carefully constructed image finally shatter, and how did I ensure that my final action wasn't revenge, but simply a statement of objective truth? I didn't need to act on Margaret's revelation immediately. The power lay not in the confrontation, but in my complete indifference. The knowledge that Juliet was drowning in debt, and that the $4,300 bag was a financial leash, only solidified my position. My strategy was pure no contact, letting their fragile facade collapse under its own unsustainable weight. My silence was the weapon. My initial burst of anger years ago had long been replaced by a quiet disappointment. They weren't bad people, they were just deeply flawed. They valued the appearance of success over the reality of family connection. I mourned the wasted energy I had spent trying to earn love, which they were too emotionally bankrupt to give. The $2 card and the Gucci bag were just symptoms of a terminal familial illness. I drafted a final, simple email, addressed only to my parents. It contained no accusations, only a statement of objective truth, confirming my permanent distance. The email simply said, "I am no longer available to manage your feelings or your debt. This relationship is closed for audit." I didn't send it yet. The timing had to be perfect. The truth was locked and loaded, but the moment for detonation hadn't arrived. What was the public, embarrassing event that finally forced my parents' carefully constructed facade to crumble, making my final email the coup grace? The perfect timing I waited for arrived, delivered by the universe with a delicious sense of irony. Juliet, attempting to look successful at a major industry gala, was caught on camera publicly sobbing after her $4,300 Gucci bag was stolen. The news report mentioned her distress, confirming her financial instability, the very debt my parents tried to hide. The facade was cracking on primetime TV. Dad, seeing their image shattered, called me immediately. I allowed the call to go to voicemail. He wasn't asking how I was, he was demanding I call Juliet to manage her feelings before the local paper picked up the story. Their focus remained entirely on reputation management. Their crisis wasn't Juliet's pain. It was the public perception of the $4,300 loss. Their prioritization was exposed for the world to see. That was the moment. I opened the drafted email, confirmed the addresses, and hit send. The subject line was relationship audit. The body, "I am no longer available to manage your feelings or your debt. This relationship is closed for audit." Final statement, "My value is not for sale." No anger, no drama, just a clinical, devastating severing of ties. My revenge was done. The email was sent, the audit complete. But what happens when the scapegoat leaves the toxic system, and what did I realize was the biggest, most satisfying gift I ever gave myself? After I hit send on that final email, the silence was total. It wasn't the agonizing silence of fear, but the deep, satisfying peace of a battlefield finally cleared. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for a call, a text, or an apology. I was simply living, fully present in my own space. The anxiety that had been a constant companion for 3 decades simply vanished. I had reclaimed my life force. My professional training became my greatest tool for detachment. I now saw the Williams family drama not as my life, but as a case study, a textbook example of narcissistic family dynamics and the scapegoat mechanism. The separation felt clean and objective. I didn't hate them, I simply recognized them as incompatible with my mental health. That objectivity was the ultimate freedom. I was free from the emotional pull of their chaos. I realized the $2 card wasn't just a gift, it was a diagnosis. It confirmed their inability to value me, prompting me to perform the self-intervention I had postponed for years. That card was ironically the most valuable gift they ever gave me, because it was the key that unlocked my independence. My biggest revenge wasn't the email, but the peace I found afterward. The peace was profound, but the ripple effects of my exit continued. What final, pathetic attempt did my mother make to break the no-contact boundary, and how did my professional life unexpectedly flourish after shedding the burden of family chaos? The absence of the family scapegoat, me, created a power vacuum. Without my emotional labor, the system fractured. Dad, who relied on me to mediate his constant arguments with Mom, was now facing her full force. Juliet, deprived of my stability and emotional bailouts, was spiraling further into her financial troubles. They lacked the internal resources to self-regulate, a fact I observed with clinical, detached interest. Their crisis wasn't just internal. With the public embarrassment over Juliet's stolen Gucci bag, they started receiving unwanted attention. People started asking questions about Juliet's successful career, questioning the family narrative. I felt a brief pang of ironic empathy for their self-inflicted pain. They valued reputation above all, and now their reputation was the very thing they couldn't control. The system required a shock absorber, and I was no longer filling that role. The family equilibrium was irrevocably broken. Margaret, through a secure channel, informed me that Mom had started seeing a therapist, not to understand her own actions, but to find a way to manipulate Maya back. That detail confirmed their complete lack of introspection. Their desperation was my ongoing liberation. I was no longer the family therapist, I was the healthy element that rejected the toxic environment. The financial and emotional cost of keeping up their facade was now forcing them into genuine crisis. I finally saw the truth. They didn't reject me, I rejected their broken system. But how did the final, subtle retribution, the $4,300 debt they tried to hide, resurface and become the ultimate downfall of the Williams family's perfect image? The stealing of Juliet's Gucci bag wasn't the end, it was the beginning of the end. Without the bag as collateral, and with Juliet panicking, her creditors, the silent, impersonal forces of the financial world, finally moved. Aunt Margaret sent me a link, a small, dry business article detailing a lien placed on Juliet's condo due to delinquent payments linked to a failed venture. The facade of the successful daughter was officially and publicly shattered by cold, hard data. My parents, who only cared about reputation, were facing a nightmare worse than any public argument, financial reckoning. Their attempts to buy Juliet's silence and maintain the perfect image had spectacularly failed. The media attention around the condo lien was merciless. Dad's voicemail was no longer about Juliet's feelings, it was a desperate, panicked plea for my professional financial advice, a role they never respected me enough to ask me to fill before. The tables had turned completely. The daughter they undervalued was the only one who could potentially save their image, yet they had irrevocably cut themselves off from her support. I felt zero obligation. The $2 card versus the $4,300 debt that multiplied, the irony was a beautiful, devastating form of justice. I didn't need to act, the consequences of their choices were doing the work for me. I deleted Dad's voicemail. My only duty was to myself and my clients. I raised my coffee cup to my reflection. My revenge was not about making them pay, it was about ensuring I never had to pay their emotional price again. The financial reckoning was complete, the family narrative destroyed. But how did I ensure my final, public closure with the Williams name, and what is the single, most important piece of advice I give to anyone else stuck in a $2 family? Months later, standing on a stage speaking at a major psychology conference, I finally articulated the core of my freedom. Many of us search for revenge, but the greatest revenge is not destruction, it is radical self-worth. I realized my value was never measured by a $2 card or a $4,300 bag. My value was the stability I provided to others, a resource they used without contributing. The irony is that my parents, obsessed with financial success, were emotionally impoverished. And I, the stable, boring one, was actually the rich one, rich in boundaries, rich in self-respect, and rich in peace. True success is setting your own price, and I set mine far above their ability to pay. The audience, many of whom were professionals from dysfunctional families, nodded in profound understanding. I had achieved closure not through a dramatic confrontation, but through internal validation. I didn't need their apology to heal, I needed their silence. The Williams family, lost in their manufactured crisis, became irrelevant. My life was now the counter-narrative, a success built not on performative gifts, but on authentic mental health. I finally understood that I was not the victim of their story, I was the author of my own ending. As I stepped off the stage, I saw Aunt Margaret in the back, smiling with pride. The cycle was officially broken. Did they ever truly learn the cost of that $2 card? Or did they simply find a new scapegoat to absorb their chaos? Find out in the final chapter of the $2 Christmas card. I had successfully neutralized Dad's frantic calls, but Mom tried a new tactic. The voicemail was a perfect blend of fake sweetness and intense emotional blackmail. "Oh, Maya, your father is so stressed. We need your professional touch. We're facing financial ruin. You're our daughter. Please, honey, you know how much we need you to fix this. Don't you care about your family name?" The old Maya would have instantly jumped into fixing mode, fueled by guilt. But the new Maya, the auditor I had become, felt nothing but a clinical assessment of their manipulation. I deleted the message mid-sentence. My mind was perfectly clear. Their crisis was the direct, predictable result of their own actions. I was not responsible for managing the consequences of their financial irresponsibility and emotional neglect. Giving them professional financial advice would be opening the door to the very toxicity I had fought so hard to escape. It would be agreeing to be their emotional and financial scapegoat once more. My decision was rooted in self-preservation, not vengeance. I wrote a quick, brief response to Margaret: "I cannot and will not intervene. Their problems are consequences, not emergencies. My energy is reserved for my clients and myself." They were finally willing to give me the respect of asking for my professional help, but only when they needed me to clean up their multi-million-dollar mess. That respect was conditional, and it was $2 too late. I learned that the price of my professional integrity and personal peace was no contact. That price was non-negotiable, and it was the best investment I ever made. The $2 Christmas card wasn't just an insult, it was the receipt for their failure to invest in their relationship with me. Now, the final bill for that $2 investment had come due in the form of crippling debt and public humiliation. I didn't cause their downfall, I merely removed myself, allowing their flawed architecture to finally collapse. The choice was clear: self-preservation over family obligation. But what was the final, defining change I made to permanently close the chapter on the Williams name? And what is the single, most powerful lesson this $2 Christmas card taught me about boundaries? Six months into no contact, a letter arrived, a desperate, formal attempt to break my resolve. It wasn't an apology, it was a demand for my presence at a mandatory family meeting to discuss the restoration of reputation. The entire letter was centered on the financial and social cost of my absence. Even at the brink of ruin, their priority remained the outward facade, not the internal reality of their fractured relationships. I didn't send a letter back. I didn't even respond through Margaret. Instead, I focused on my breathing, my physical reaction to the old anxiety triggers. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They still hadn't processed that their authority over me was null and void. My silence was the answer, the ultimate boundary enforcement. I shredded the letter, watching the paper that represented their final grasp crumble into confetti. The audit is closed. My life is not a crisis management service for emotionally immature adults. That was my final word on the matter. The most powerful confrontation isn't a yell, but a quiet, permanent exit. The chapter was shut, the boundary enforced. But what was the single, most beautiful realization I had about the $2 card, and what is the crucial final advice I have for anyone still holding on to toxic family loyalty? The $2 Christmas card was the most important financial document of my life. It was a receipt that clearly stated my price tag in their eyes, $2. It taught me that when people show you exactly how little they value you, believe them. Don't fight for a higher price, simply take your invaluable goods elsewhere and refuse to be sold. The biggest lie we tell ourselves is that we owe family unconditional loyalty, even when the relationship is conditionally abusive. That loyalty becomes a tax on your mental health. True love doesn't require performance or payment. My victory wasn't seeing them fail, it was seeing myself succeed, independent of their definitions. That is the only revenge that truly sets you free. So, if you're stuck in a $2 family, start your audit today. Find your price, and if they can't afford it, close the account. Your peace is priceless. What was the single most difficult boundary I had to set? And what happened when my parents finally tried to use Juliet as the ultimate pawn to break my no-contact rule? Don't miss the final closing thoughts and bonus content. Throughout the entire process, Aunt Margaret remained the crucial, healthy lifeline. She never pushed me to reconcile, never judged my boundaries. She simply provided information when asked and, more importantly, unconditional validation. Over coffee, she told me, "Your parents don't understand that you didn't leave them, you left their broken system. You should be proud. You were the strongest person in that house. Margaret wasn't the only one." I found new allies in friends and colleagues, people who saw and respected my inherent value without demanding performance or emotional repayment. This new chosen family was built on reciprocity and genuine affection. This was the true healing, replacing the transactional love of the Williams family with the unconditional support of healthy connections. You didn't give me the $2 card, Margaret, but you gave me the right price tag. This realization brought the final piece of peace. My vengeance was not external, it was internal, the refusal to be defined by their low estimation of me. But what did I discover was the most unexpected, final consequence for Juliet? And how does the concept of the $2 card apply to your own life and relationships? Stay tuned for the final, empowering moral of the story. Once the emotional weight of managing the Williams family was gone, my career exploded. I invested the energy I used to spend on crisis management into my clients and my business. My practice tripled, and I started speaking at major events. My success was built on authenticity and boundary setting, the very skills I learned surviving my family. The irony was the fuel. The stable, boring daughter became the public face of emotional success. My environment now reflected my inner peace. My office was bright, minimalist, and built on mutual respect. I was no longer the rescuer or the emotional buffer, I was the guide. The positive feedback from clients reinforced the true meaning of value gained through honest work, not through transactional obligation. The difference was night and day. I realized I was not selfish for leaving, I was generous to myself. My parents' financial distress became a footnote in the financial news, a distant tragedy I watched with detachment. They were still searching for a scapegoat, but the position was permanently closed. My new life was the ultimate, unanswerable response to their $2 card. But what became of Juliet, the golden child who cost the family everything, and what is the definitive advice I have for you about escaping the family tax? Once the emotional weight of managing the Williams family was gone, my career exploded. I invested the energy I used to spend on crisis management into my clients and my business. My practice tripled, and I started speaking at major events. My success was built on authenticity and boundary setting, the very skills I learned surviving my family. The irony was the fuel. The stable, boring daughter became the public face of emotional success. My environment now reflected my inner peace. My office was bright, minimalist, and built on mutual respect. I was no longer the rescuer or the emotional buffer, I was the guide. The positive feedback from clients reinforced the true meaning of value gained through honest work, not through transactional obligation. The difference was night and day. I realized I was not selfish for leaving, I was generous to myself. My parents' financial distress became a footnote in the financial news, a distant tragedy I watched with detachment. They were still searching for a scapegoat, but the position was permanently closed. My new life was the ultimate, unanswerable response to their $2 card. But what became of Juliet, the golden child who cost the family everything? And what is the definitive advice I have for you about escaping the family tax? Without me, the Williams family system did what all dysfunctional systems do. They found a replacement. Margaret's final note confirmed that Dad had started heavily criticizing Juliet's inability to manage her life, attempting to shift the blame for their financial ruin onto her. Juliet, now desperate for parental approval, was falling back into the role of the new emotional punching bag. The most telling shift was the complete and total lack of introspection. They never once connected their actions, the $2 card, the conditional love, the financial secrecy, to their consequences, my exit, Juliet's debt. They truly believed the problem was external, my selfishness, Juliet's incompetence. They remained the victims in their own minds. That observational clarity gave me power. They were predictable, and I was free. I felt pity for Juliet, but I didn't feel obligation. Their cycle continues, but it continues without my energy, without my peace, and without my life. My story ends where their crisis began, with the permanent enforcement of my boundaries. What is the single most important action you can take right now to stop being your family's scapegoat? And how do you turn your $2 moment into your greatest source of self-worth? The biggest shift in the family wasn't the financial ruin or Juliet's new scapegoat status. It was their failure to replace my emotional role effectively. They could find a new victim, but they couldn't find a new therapist, mediator, and stable pillar combined. The void I left was a functional one, and it remained empty. That empty space was the truest symbol of my freedom. I realized that my value wasn't $2, it was foundational. I learned to embrace the scapegoat label not as an insult, but as a badge of honor. It meant I was the healthiest person in the system, the one strong enough to hold the family's chaos long enough to escape it. I stopped trying to prove I was loved or worthy. My inherent worth was self-evident, proven by the very chaos my absence caused. That self-acceptance was the end of the war. The noise of their life became a dull hum, easily tuned out. That's the final piece. They defined me by $2. I defined myself by my boundaries and my freedom. That is a priceless exchange. My peace is secure, but I want to hear about yours. What is the one boundary you need to set this week, and how will you start prioritizing your priceless peace over any price tag they try to give you? Let's discuss your journey in the comments. My story isn't unique, it's a universal one about value, scarcity, and self-worth. Every toxic family system operates on an internal economy. They assess your price, and if they pay low, they expect you to make up the difference with emotional labor. The $2 card was my wake-up call, and I urge you to look for yours. Start your audit now. Don't wait for your $2 moment to turn into a $4,300 debt. The first crucial lesson: believe the price tag. When someone, especially family, consistently gives you less than you're worth, they are showing you their honest, if painful, valuation. Stop arguing with the receipt. Accept the data and adjust your investment portfolio accordingly. Don't spend $100 worth of energy trying to change a $2 mindset. The second lesson is about your role. You are not a crisis manager. The moment I refused to clean up my parents' financial and emotional messes, their system failed. Their crisis is not your emergency. Your job is not to be the family's shock absorber. You deserve to invest your specialized skills, your stability, your empathy, into people who reciprocate. Third lesson: the scapegoat is the strongest. If you were the family scapegoat, take that as proof of your emotional intelligence and resilience. You were the only one strong enough to hold the truth and the chaos. Your departure causes chaos because you were the pillar. Claim that strength, own that power, and build a new life using the very qualities they tried to exploit. Fourth, boundaries are not cruelty, they are self-defense. My no-contact email was not vengeful, it was a line of defense protecting my peace. Fifth, your peace is priceless. Don't let anyone, especially family, convince you that your peace is worth $2 or a conditional promise. That peace is the real revenge. Protect it fiercely. I've shared my lessons, now I want to hear yours. What part of the story resonated most deeply with you? And what is the single biggest change you are ready to make today to honor your priceless worth?